Hey, what is happening gamers? It is the Honest Gamer here with Quantic Media. This week it's time for another Looks Back At episode, and with that in mind, here is the third episode in the series covering Final Fantasy VI through to 8. Enjoy! Final Fantasy VI released in 1994 on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and was initially widely known as the third game in North America, as it wasn't actually shipped outside of Japan when it first released. The game was later remade for the PlayStation in 1999, Nintendo's Game Boy Advance in 2006, and for the Wii in different territories throughout 2011. Again, Mr. Sakaguchi was set to direct the game, however did step down due to other commitments after becoming vice president of the company. His replacement was Mr. Yoshinori Kitase, whom initially had wanted to become a film director, having been impressed by the movie Star Wars when he was just age 12. But in 1990 he did decide to join Square and went on to direct Final Fantasy VI through to 8. Sid made his appearance during this game as a scientist for the Gestalt Empire, who raises a young knight whom when older rebelled against their forces. The story centered around Locke, a member of the resistance against the oppressive Gestalt Empire, when he saves Tira, a young woman being used by the Empire as a weapon of war. Together they journey alongside a huge group of 14 characters, an amount not seen in any previous Final Fantasy game, and overthrow the Empire's leader, bringing peace, life, and prosperity back to their world. Final Fantasy VI featured many improvements, including a noted increase in the graphics, which allowed for a change of combat scenarios and detailed backgrounds, ranging from fighting on water rafts to on stage in front of an audience. The ATB system returned, and as an addition to combat was the use of powerful attacks when health was low, which would feature in the later games. The enhanced graphics was most likely the game's biggest new feature, as it was the best that could be achieved from the Super Nintendo Entertainment System at its height. The game was given an incredibly powerful reception, receiving winning marks all around the world, with companies such as IGN calling it the best RPG in the series. It sold close to 3.5 million units, and once again these fantastic selling figures allowed Square to begin development for their next big jump up the console ladder, who had their eyes closely fixed on a couple of next generation consoles. Overall, the game was praised for its vast improvements in graphics, excellent storyline and amazing characters. Final Fantasy VI and its new director managed to continue the trend of pushing the series to new heights, and the next installment would be proof of just that. Final Fantasy VII released onto the PlayStation in 1997, and for the PC during the next year. Production had actually begun back in 1994, and initially Square wished to create the game for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. However, due to continuously evolving console development, it was planned for the Nintendo 64. But due to its lack of storage space, Square finally landed a decision with the PlayStation. It was the first title in the series to be widely released outside of Japan, and Mr. Sakaguchi took up place designing and producing the game, whilst the veteran Nobu Uematsu returned, creating a brilliantly detailed musical score for the game, using the console's newer hardware to enhance what he could make. During the story, Sid made his appearance as a main playable character, whose dream of travelling into outer space goes unrealised, and the project was spearheaded by Yoshinori as his second time in the role of director. Final Fantasy VII's story was based around a young man named Cloud, drafted into a group fighting the Shinra Corporation called Avalanche. At the start of the game, Cloud and the others are on a mission to destroy one of the Mako reactors owned by the company, which is slowly destroying the planet. And after a successful attempt, the second doesn't go so well when the group are ambushed and ultimately split up. Cloud then runs into a young woman under threat from Shinra's employees attempting to kidnap her. Later, after escaping Midgar, Shinra's capital city, the group set off meeting others with a similar end goal, and through the story defeat those trying to destroy the world. This game was just a massive improvement in every way. The storyline was one that had never been heard of before. It was brilliantly imagined, the music was beautiful and fitting, and gameplay was new and unique, with the combat system feeling exciting and redefined, with its new use of limit breaks and brand new effects taking combat to a whole new level. Limit breaks were built up after being damaged over time, and as players progressed they gained access to newer, better looking and more damaging limit breaks. Summoning also took on a different look thanks to the enhanced graphics. Travel was bettered as you could now submerge underwater in a realistic looking environment, and the world was full of detail assisted by the PlayStation's newer hardware, allowing for improved 3D graphics all around. Another new aspect of the game was the use of materia as a new skill system, allowing the party to customise abilities to use magic and summon creatures, and as characters gained in level, so did their materia, allowing for newer, more powerful abilities to be used. Another improvement was the heavier use of varied minigames, allowing the player to partake in racing chocobos, snowboarding and playing various minigames during their time at the Gold Saucer. Final Fantasy VII was met with a massively positive reaction from fans of the series. It is today the best-selling game of them all, and having sold 10 million copies as of May 2010. It was the most expensive video game created at the time, and all of this was desperately needed to ensure that the game stood the test of time, with its graphics being impressive enough to fans of the series to make it yet another hit. It was praised for its better graphics, amazing soundtrack, improved combat and depth of storyline, pulling the player into its world and believing in the character's happiness as well as sadness experienced throughout the story. Its only downside would be that again the game suffered from typos during its Japanese to English translation, and some called it linear, which personally I would disagree with. Its popularity would see several sequels and prequels made to appease fans' eagerness for more of the game's unique storyline, as well as a feature-length movie developed surrounding the events of the original game's plot. Overall, Final Fantasy VII sold the PlayStation. It was a huge success and achieved nearly entirely positive reviews from every major company. It stood the test of time, allowing for it to be named several times near the top of the greatest video games ever in several prominent lists. It also proved once again that Square was entirely capable of moving production of its series to yet another generation of console. Final Fantasy VIII was developed again for the PlayStation in 1999, and was also released in the year 2000 for the PC. Again, the project was directed by Mr. Katase. Development had actually begun in 1997 during the company's translation of the previous game, and Final Fantasy VIII is noted as having for the first time mixed fantasy with realism, which produced characters whom were in proportion to the world during its normal events and whilst on the world map. Travelling across this map was also realistically done, with vehicles being in proportion to visited locations within reason. Nobu Uematsu returned, and this time created a soundtrack which featured for the first time in the history of the series a Chinese singer named Fei Wong, who sang the Eyes on Me theme tune. The story focused on the activities of a group of young mercenaries based at Balab Garden, and were led by the main protagonist Squall Lionheart. Balam was a training school for the gifted as they attempted to advance on to become a part of the Garden's elite unit named Seed. During their training, the Galbadian army invades a nearby territory, forcing them to seek aid from the mercenaries. Accepting, the group are then sent off under orders from the recurring character Sid, whom at this time is the Garden's training headmaster, and succeed in defending against the Galbadian forces. They then set off on a mission to attempt to assassinate the dangerous sorcerer Edea, who is behind the hostile invasion, but fail. Throughout the story, they then learn that Edea is merely a tool of Ultimecia, an even stronger sorceress attempting to alter the flow of time. However, our heroes are successful in battle, saving the world and ending her influence. Final Fantasy VIII featured a few improvements over the previous games. It took advantage of more time with the PlayStation, allowing developers to improve the graphics system further and, as stated, give it a more realistic feel. They also implemented what was to me a rather confusing junctioning system, and the use of Guardian Forces or GFs to replace the more commonly known summons from previous games. Spells were also for the first time drawn from enemies during battle, and Final Fantasy VIII did feature a card game which further popularised the use of minigames first seen in Final Fantasy VII. The game received a vast majority of positive reviews, but did fall down to reviewers on its complicated battle system, with companies such as IGN referring to it as intensely complicated, but with GameSpot stating it allowed for a huge amount of customization using the junction system. The PC port wasn't favoured quite as much. It did have improved graphics, but was hard to play with a keyboard. Overall, Final Fantasy VIII is the fastest selling title in the series, and as of March 2003 has sold more than 8 million copies worldwide. It was a massive success with fans loving the game, and Square now had its foot firmly in the door over at Sony, and were taking the PlayStation continuously to new heights of popularity as its series continued to grow. Okay guys, for now that's all from me. For more, be sure to subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on both Twitter and Facebook to stay up to date with all my newest upcoming releases. And as always, it is the Honest Gamer here with Quantic Media, and happy gaming.